Welcome friends! Today I'll be going through how to find a good fight as a new player. Maggie and Tyrodactyl did a very basic how to get to a fight video, but I didn't think it went quite far enough. A link to that will be in the description and it will be useful for the very basics. This video then will build on that and try to give an overview of how to read the map to find good fights. And by good fights I mean fights that you can make a difference at or that you won't be spawn camped basically. Anyway, so the first thing you'll need to do is press M to get onto the map, and you'll come onto this map screen here. And I'm going to be going through a few examples, so I'll be going over this as we go through. But the first thing we need to do is go to the right here. Well, I'm going to turn mine off, so this is going to be what yours will look like, most likely. Unless you've already done this as well. But it's quite hard to read, you can't see exactly where the fights are, even though the dots do sort of help. But if we go to the heat maps and go to enemy activity, personally I think the map's much easier to read. And we can see exactly how many enemies there are in each area. And also, I'll mention now that there's an enemy and ally activity tab that you can use, which makes the fights that are almost even grey, and more allies it goes bluer, and more enemies it goes redder. But to be fair, I find this a bit more difficult to read because it's a bit more confusing. But you could use this instead of what I'm going to explain in a second. So this will make more sense after I've explained. So anyway, we'll come back to the enemy activity. So the first general rule of thumb is that a fight that is 50-50 will be a good fight because it'll give both sides the most equal chance to defeat each other basically, and you'll most likely be able to fight each other on even terms and not be spawn camped, which is the worst thing to happen really, or be spawn camping someone else and only getting a kill every so often and just sitting there. So I'll try and find a fight that's not even. Okay, here we go. So this here is 68% to 32%, and I'd say as a general rule of thumb, about 60% overpop almost guarantees victory to the faction that has 60%. So in this case, the Vanu has almost 70%, so they're most likely to win. And at this fight, I'm pretty certain it's just going to be a spawn camp. It's at Red Ridge Communications. Yeah, I think the NC will be stuck in the spawn room here, and it won't be very much fun for the NC. And on the flip side, the VS will probably be getting a few kills as they run out. Something else to mention is that there can be three-way fights, although I don't think there is one right now. But three-way fights, usually at biolabs like this Allerton biolab, would end up as stalemates that would last for a long time but never really get anywhere because each faction would be fighting each other and never actually capture all the points. And especially in a biolab where there's 3 points, each faction have a point and never really take the biolab. So in this instance there could be a TR Allerton broadcaster, but this one NC here Allerton botany wing, and then say VS and Allerton biolab. And that fight might go on for hours, and it could be fun. It could be fun in more of a team deathmatch way, but it won't be such a big push, or there won't be movement across the map. But some people enjoy that. And then what I'm going to talk about now is that this percentage system also relies on magnitude, the magnitude of how many people are there and how much of a difference you can make. So to explain that, we'll look at a smaller fight. So we're going to go here to. Let's have a look for one that's a bit closer. Yeah, this one probably makes sense. We're at the Hacker Southern Post, and here there's 62% NC, and we'll say 6% NC and 40% TR, and there's both now 12 to 24 to 12 to 24, and this kind of makes my point, is that as one person moving to this fight, because there's only around probably, I'd say there's probably about 30 people at that fight. So one more person added onto one team can really throw the balance. Like here, the population of TR's gone up again, and the fight's sort of evened out. So if you're a lone wolf, or you don't have friends to play with, or you're playing with a small squad, it might be worth checking out smaller fights like this and thinking, and not taking it as a 60%, meaning that 60% I can't fight there, because in this case, the percentage that one person makes is much larger than it is, say, at this fight over here at Quartz Ridge Camp, where there's probably over 150 participants, probably more, and one person isn't really going to make a difference there. So to sum that up, it's going to be easier to make a difference at a smaller fight with overpop than it is to make a difference at a bigger fight with overpop. And it might be more rewarding to go to these smaller fights and to be able to retaliate, or to think, I could probably leave the spawn room at this fight because there's not enough enemies to completely watch the spawn room and camp it. Okay, so another thing to mention is that it can be a choice of playstyle not to go to these sort of fights and not to always go for fights that are even. I mean, it's perfectly fine to go for a fight on tactical grounds. That people might say that if I don't think they are now, the TR could be pushing to Havar Tech Plant. Say if they didn't have they do have a tech plant, but say if they didn't have Mao Tech Plant and they wanted a tech plant, they might want to push to Havar Tech Plant and say have 60% population themselves. But they want that population to assure they'd get the victory so that they could pull tanks outside of their warp gate. Similarly, this is an alert right now on Indos. That's quite interesting. And that people that are overpopping here could be doing it so that they get more land territory control here, so to win the alert. And that's perfectly fine. That's very competitive. And so it's not always good to think of basically which is a good fight, how many people are there. Sometimes it is worth thinking we have to take this base because this base is important. It's strategically important. Okay, another factor that can impact more is things like what Rel calls force multipliers, like air, tanks, and maxes, which he did a good video on. But basically, air can completely camp a spawn room, so you can't get outside. And even though you may have an overpopulation of 60%, that getting out of that spawn room may be near impossible if there's so many rocket pods that you can't get outside. And this has happened in the server smashers quite a few times. And similarly with tanks, the tanks could be shelling the spawn room. Or perhaps maxes, say, if there's 60% of your forces, but 40% of their forces, but their 40% are all on the point with their maxes, you might not be able to get onto that point. Although you could that could still be a very good fight, because then it'd be more of an objective to try and take out those maxes. But what I'm saying is that it's not always just the percentage, the raw percentage that represents how many people are there, or what sort of power is there. So 52% TR here could be comprised 40% of tanks, which would make them much more powerful than the Vanu 47%, which would just be all infantry. And then finally, as a sort of idea, this only really works as defenders, is that if you are massively overpopped as a defender, if you can destroy their spawn points like a sunderer, and this would probably only work like 65% overpop, then you could shift that population. It would give you a chance to fight back, basically. If they can't respawn, it could lower their population. And that's one of the ways of how to even the balance and the populations out. If you destroy their spawn points, you might actually have a chance. But this would only really work as a defender. Although it works as an attacker if you're destroying the SU, say, in a biolab. Or TI Alloys now has a SU, I think. So anyway, I know this has been a bit more complex, and there's some more complex ideas in there. But I hope this has been helpful, and if it hasn't, maybe I'll give it another shot and try and make it a bit more clear. And if you want anything to be elucidated, please say. Likes and comments are very appreciated, and if you want to see more, subscribe. Joshino.